Hey everyone, could we sit down, please? We need to get started. We got a two online here. We got two online.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah.
Artsiom.
Artsiom is online.
No, the first one.
No, she's here.
Yeah.
David's here.
Yeah.
So Artsiom and Pavel.
Well, starting now.
Yeah. Get started, please. Yeah, okay. Okay, hello everybody. This is the final session of the day, final panel, not final panel, but the final full panel. And it's on Belarusian society. I just want to make sure that I've got all the panelists here. So Artsiom and Pavel, are you online? Oh, Pavel's here. Okay. So it's just Artsiom. Sizintsau? Is he here? I don't know. Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, everybody's here. Okay, great. Okay, I'm David Marples, University of Alberta in Canada, and more or less a regular here now, I would say, although this is at least my third year in a row. The first paper is by Maria Polakova, and it's on architecture of controlled disinformation, blockchain and social media in authoritarian Belarus. So I've given each speaker.
Anyone sitting on it or is it on the floor? No? Okay.
Okay, I've given each speaker 15 minutes, and I'll give them a warning at 5 minutes, okay? So, I don't know if there's any easier.
Hello, it's the sound is good. Oh, yeah, thank you. So I will start very quickly because I already cut my paper a lot, but still I have to fit within a short time for this topic. So the digital environment is not external to society anymore. Today is one of its primary structuring spaces in which information is produced, circulated, and interpreted, and increasingly governed. This also means that digital space is not neutral. Its operation depends on legal frameworks, institutional practices, and technological design, which together shape how individuals communicate, behave, and engage with information. In this presentation, I focus on 3 interconnected domains: information, social media, and the digital economy. The point I want to make is that technologies themselves are not inherently democratic or authoritarian. Their political and social effects depend on how they become embedded with broader system of governance. For this reason, I describe the Belarusian digital environment as kind of sandbox, or more precisely as laboratory in which digital systems are adapted within an authoritarian model of governance. To understand how this operates in practice, I want to begin with information and social media. What matters first is the scale of digital integration within Belarusian society. Let's see if it works. There we go. This one.
Use the arrows.
Arrows. Okay, thank you. Sorry for too much of information here. By end of 2025, internet penetration had exceeded over 90% of population. It's a huge number, while social media had become deeply embedded in everyday communication and information flows. As a result, digital space increasingly functions as an extension of social and political life rather than something separate from it. The structure of this environment is also important. Platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, Vkontakte, and Telegram reach millions of users and play a major role in shaping information flows. I will skip some data about each of platform to save some time, but I want to just point out that not only opposition, for example, Nechta, was used widely in 2020, but also state institutions and pro-government actors increasingly adopt the platform as well, turning it into broader infrastructure of political communication. Because of this, control over digital space is not only about restricting information, but also about shaping how events are interpreted and understood. Several mechanisms are particularly visible in this process. First, it's framing. Events are consistently represented through a limited set of oppositions, such as stability versus chaos, security versus extremism, and so on. Internal tensions are often contrasted with images of instability abroad, including riots, migration crisis, or broader narratives of social and moral decline in Western societies, and so on. Second, repetition. The same interpretations are reproduced across multiple channels, state TV, official statements, and aligned digital platforms, creating consistency across the information environment and reducing space for alternative interpretations. Third, selection. Certain facts, voices, or perspectives are given greater visibility, while others are omitted, minimized. This shapes not only what is said, but also which issues remain present in public attention and which gradually disappears from the view. Over time, this creates an uneven information environment in which some topics become highly visible and continuously discussed, while others remain fragmented, difficult to access. Fourth, labeling. Terms such as extremism, destabilizing activity, or foreign influence are applied to individuals, organizations, media platforms, or forms of online activity. These labels are not merely descriptive. They carry legal and political consequences, redefining disagreements or criticism as potential threat to public order or state stability, and helping prepare the ground for further legal or administrative action. Unlike in many European countries, where misleading or harmful content is often removed or moderated, in Belarus, these processes are more closely connected to systems of legal classification and monitoring. Content may remain visible, but interaction with it, including subscriptions, comments, reports, or donation, can themselves become subject to observation and potential legal consequences. This is where law becomes central. According to Freedom House, websites and blogs in Belarus fall within the official definition of mass media and are therefore subject to state regulations. Reports only point to the use of anti-extremism legislation, digital surveillance systems, and facial recognition technologies to identify individuals involved in protest or online activity. As a result, posts, comments, reposts, and so on can become legal evidence. Digital expression, therefore, become not only a matter of communication, but also a matter of legal risk. An important element of this system is data governance. Unlike frameworks such as GDPR in UK, which primarily aim to protect personal privacy, Belarusian legal arrangements often facilitate the collection of use of digital information for monitoring and control purposes and legal classification. The scale of this classification is significant. According to Freedom House, access to thousands of online resources labeled as extremist has been restricted in Belarus, while the human rights organization Vesna, for example, for 2025 year alone, more than 2,000 additional materials were officially classified as extremists. Extremism, therefore, functions not only as a legal category, but increasingly as an infrastructure of classification that expands the boundaries of what can be formally treated as politically dangerous. Digital platforms themselves shape informational flow. Automated accounts can reinforce particular narratives, while the speed of online communication creates what is often described as Brandolini's law. Misinformation spread much faster than it can be corrected. As a result, simplified and emotionally charged narratives often gain visibility more easily than nuanced analyses. Over time, this dynamic becomes behavioral. Individuals begin considering not only what they believe, but also what they can safely like, share, comment on, subscribe to, or store on their devices. In this sense, digital governance operates not only through punishment, but also through anticipation and self-censorship. Taken together, these mechanisms form what can be described as an architecture of control, a system in which narratives shape public perception, digital platforms enable observation, legal frameworks classify behavior, and enforcement creates pressure to conform. Before I will go further, just to check how many of you are familiar with the blockchain. Okay, at least someone. So I will give just a very short explanation. I was ready for that. It's a quite new thing. So blockchain technologies emerge as systems designed to enable transactions and record keeping without relying entirely on central intermediaries such as banks or state institutions. Instead, verification is distributed across a network of participants, called nodes as well, creating what is often described as a trustless system, meaning that trust is embedded in the protocol itself rather than delegated to single authority. Although these ideas developed from earlier work of cryptography and distributed systems, they become widely visible after the publication of Satoshi Nakamoto Bitcoin white paper in 2008, during the global financial crisis and broader collapse in trust in financial institutions. Blockchain technologies become closely associated with ideas of decentralization, openness, and broad access to financial participation. What is very interesting in the Belarusian case is that this technology was adopted within a very different institutional logic. Rather than reducing the role of intermediaries or expanding open participation, blockchain actively became integrated into structured legal and administrative framework centered around the high-tech park. It's been mentioned today a few times already. Participation became conditional, access regulated, and activity closely connected to state-approved institutional structures. As a result, decentralization was not removed, but reorganized within a controlled institutional framework. Moving deeper into the economic sphere, blockchain in Belarus was not treated as a marginal technological experiment, but unlike in many other countries at the time, incorporated into a broader state-led economic strategy. Belarus was also among the earliest countries to introduce a relatively comprehensive legal approach to blockchain technologies, including the formal recognition of smart contracts. At the time, when many jurisdictions were still debating on how to approach crypto assets, Belarus had already established a system centered around the high-tech park that combined legal recognition, tax incentives, and a functioning regulatory environment. In this context, very important is Presidential Decree number 8 on the development of the digital economy, pushing us to paradigms 5 and 6. This decree legalized a wide range of crypto activities, including mining, token issuance, exchange operations, and ownership of digital assets by individuals. It also introduced explicit legal definition of blockchain, tokens, and smart contracts, and created a special regulatory regime within the high-tech park, offering tax exemptions and operational advantages. Importantly, the framework incorporated elements inspired by English law, particularly in its recognition of smart contracts and the structuring of legal relations in a way that would be familiar to international investors. And this played a role key in enhancing the jurisdiction's credibility and attracting foreign capital, as it's reduced legal uncertainty and aligned the Belarusian model with widely trusted legal principles used in global financial markets. Here we saw already a few times information about GDP, and in the middle you can see the peak of high technology park reached 2021. That's been mentioned several times today. Let me just roughly introduce you that in 2017, when this decree was introduced, the sector accounted for roughly 2 to 3% of Belarus's GDP, but by 21st, it's already been 6 to 7%, with exceeding $3 billion annually as an export. We will jump here a little bit. Here I also discussing the introducing Belarus as intermediate layer, but partly it's been mentioned in previous papers. Rather than viewing the individual firms in isolation, it is more useful to understand the Belarusian blockchain sector as a structured financial ecosystem. By early 20s, this ecosystem operated across several interconnected layers. At the core, there were trading platforms designed to bridge traditional finance and digital assets. Platforms such as a Currency.com, for example, offer tokenized trading on equities, commodities, and in this effectively linking retail investors to global financial markets through a crypto-based interface. Surrounding this core were payments and conversion layers. Well, you can see that these layers creating very comprehensive, legally and technology advanced model for those times. So this model begins to shift after 2020, following the political crisis. But as you can see, the number was not declined, but increased. However, the 2022, with the sanctions, brought it down because it's obviously restricted Western financial infrastructure. Companies depend heavily in blockchain on international banking access, and cross-border payments came under increasing pressure. And this particularly visible in the case of that Currency.com, one of the largest blockchain and crypto platforms associated within Belarusian high-tech park. And at one stage, among the visible regulated crypto platforms operating in Europe in those times. Over time, the company restricted its operations, increasingly separating its international businesses from its Belarus-linked activities, while the Belarus-focused parts later continue under the name Dengi.com. So that's one of the examples how companies had to deal with. And let's jump a little bit through. Here we can see in this January, there was next presidential decree, which restricted even more blockchain sector. And now we have financial entities described rather as a crypto banks, because at the moment it will be required for them to go through process with National Bank of Republic of Belarus, which is quite ironic in this, if we will still remember the idea of Satoshi Nakamoto about decentralization, debanking. In parallel, Belarus also been developing its own digital currency. Not many people maybe know the digital Belarusian ruble in central bank digital currency. Although it's still under development, it points towards a very different model from the recent one. And similar patterns we can observe within different areas in information, financial spheres, structured access, mediated participation, and growing connection between technology, law, and governance. And at the same time, let's remember that this system never fully closed. Users continue developing strategies to work around restrictions through encrypted communication, VPNs, mirror sites, anonymous accounts, and moving across platforms. Here we have some cases of Mr. Gaspadar, and some other cases from Minecraft, which been used by projects for journalists. What becomes visible here is not simply a conflict between control and resistance, but a broader struggle over governance models in digital society, over who controls infrastructure, access, visibility, financial flows, and increasingly also data and artificial intelligence systems themselves. Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria. The second speaker is David Pergl of Charles University on Inter-Imperial Memory and Political Imagination, Belarusian Diaspora in Lithuania, Poland, and the Czech Republic. So, David, microphone here. About time 15 minutes, so I'll tell you what.
Can start.
Yeah.
Good evening, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this conference. In my presentation, I would like to focus on the Belarusian diaspora as an actor in memory activism and as a distinct social movement in exile after 2020. After 2020, Belarusian memory did not move into exile merely as an archive of loss or trauma. It moved as political infrastructure. By political infrastructure, I do not mean a symbolic replacement for state power or a purely cultural trace of displacement. I refer instead to a structured set of mnemonic practices, institutions, mediators, and narratives. Together, they make political coordination, legitimacy, and representation possible at a time when political action inside Belarus has become structurally impossible. My main argument today is that the Belarusian diaspora should not be understood simply as a community of refugees, nor as a cultural extension of domestic opposition politics. Rather, it functions as a mnemo-political actor, one that actively negotiates authority, sovereignty, and geopolitical, belonging to memory practices operating across different political contexts. Over the past 2 decades, research on exile and diaspora has moved beyond deficit-based approaches. Exile is no longer seen primarily as political suspension, but increasingly as a strategic position within transnational fields of power. Diasporas appear as advocates, diplomats, and normative entrepreneurs rather than passive victims. My intervention builds on this agency-oriented consensus. However, instead of asking whether diasporas possess political agency, I ask how such agency is materially and symbolically enabled. I suggest approaching memory not only as identity, discourse, or symbolic capital, but as political infrastructure, a medium through which diasporic agency is organized, stabilized, circulated, and translated across different regimes of power. This approach draws on work treating memory as praxis, circulation, and mediation, while also engaging the concept of multidirectional memory. Memory here does not operate in zero-sum logic. Instead, it enters into relations of overlap, competition, borrowing, and strategic alignment with other historical narratives. From this perspective, exile does not signal political absence. It marks a rearticulation of politics beyond the nation state, where memory becomes an operational resource rather than a passive record of the past. To conceptualize this rearticulation, I employed the notion of inter-imperiality. Inter-imperiality does not denote a linear succession of empires or post-imperial condition. Rather, it designates a situation in which multiple imperial legacies, legal orders, and mnemonic regimes coexist and conflict within the same political space. In such context, identities do not simply persist. They come into being through events that rupture existing structures and reorganize them in lasting ways. I treat the Belarusian protests of 2020 as such an event, a moment when a political nation came into being through collective action, shared symbols, and newly intensified groupness. Repression did not destroy this emergence. It displaced and transformed it. A second critical turning point followed in 2022 when Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, launched in part from Belarusian territory, radically reframed Belarusian memory politics. The invasion activated questions of responsibility, guilt, complicity, and resistance, while also accelerating the decolonization of historical imagination in exile. Together, 2020 and 2022 constitute not a rupture and an end, but a double eventful sequence through which Belarusian political subjectivity continues to come into being, now mainly in diasporic and digital spaces. Instead of proposing a typology of memory, I focus on how memory circulates between three regimes: the performative regime of protest, mobilization, and visibility, the institutional regime of representation, governance, and stabilization, and the reflexive regime of translation, cultural diplomacy, and intellectual work. These are not stages and not fixed locations. They are modes of political work, and diasporic memory constantly moves between them, depending on hosts, environments, and opportunity structures. This becomes particularly visible when we compare four key Belarusian diasporic centers: Vilnius, Warsaw, Białystok, and Prague. Vilnius occupies a unique position in Belarusian diasporic memory architecture. It functions not merely as a site of refuge, but as a symbolic center of historical continuity. Here, layers of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, imperial rule, and anti-authoritarian resistance intersect. Belarusian actors mobilize shared figures such as Francis Skaryna or Kastus Kalinowski to assert a European non-Russian genealogy of Belarusian statehood. Institutions such as the Ivan Lutskiewicz Museum or the European Humanities University anchor this work academically and culturally. Rituals such as the reburial of Kalinowski in 2019 and its subsequent activation in protest after 2020 illustrate how memory here becomes geopolitics by other means. Yet Vilnius is also a site of tension. Belarusian claims to the heritage of the Grand Duchy are sometimes perceived as cultural expansionism. Memory here is therefore highly politicized, negotiated, and externally scrutinized. In this sense, Vilnius represents a clear example of an inter-imperial memory space. Warsaw, by contrast, lacks deep symbolic resonance in Belarusian historical consciousness. This absence has paradoxically turned it into a laboratory of memory experimentation. After 2020, Warsaw emerged as the logistical and political hub of exile, hosting major media platforms, opposition figures, advocacy institutions, and large-scale commemorations. Memory practices here are pragmatic, future-oriented, and explicitly mobilizational. The dominant mnemonic bridge is Solidarność. Belarusian protests are framed as Belarusian solidarity, integrating the diaspora into Poland victories, national narrative of anti-totalitarian resistance. Memory here functions as political branding. At the same time, Warsaw reveals the risks of institutionalization, fragmentation, competition over legitimacy, and internal disputes over memory framing, especially between new exile and older opposition structures. Białystok introduces a fundamentally different dynamic. Unlike Warsaw or Vilnius, it is embedded in a region with an autochthonous Belarusian minority. Here, diasporic memory encounters long-standing local memories of trauma, marginalization, and violence, including the post-war persecution of Orthodox communities. For new political exile, this confronts heroic narratives with uncomfortable historical legacies. Festivals, radio stations, and grassroots initiatives attempt to mediate between these layers. Memory in Białystok is less mobilizational and more ethical and territorial. It forces reflection on historical responsibility not only toward Russia, but also within Polish-Belarusian relations. Prague represents a fourth regime. Its significance lies in exilic continuity and intellectual memory. The long-standing presence of the Rada of the Belarusian People's Republic, the legacy of Masaryk's interwar aid, and figures such as Skaryna or Bykov provide Prague with a narrative of Belarusian European humanism. Memory practices here are predominantly reflexive: archives, commemorative plaques, literature, translations, and academic collaboration. Less mobilizational and less visible, Prague enables memory to become translatable into Czech historical self-understanding and international cultural diplomacy. At the same time, after 2022, Prague also illustrates the fragility of such memory work, decreased attention, fragmentation, and symbolic invisibility. Together, these four centers form a distributed mnemonic ecosystem. Vilnius provides historical legitimacy, Warsaw generates political mobilization, Białystok anchors ethical reflection, Prague offers intellectual depth and translation. None of these regimes is sufficient alone. Their interaction enables Belarusian memory in exile to function as political infrastructure across inter-imperial space. The Belarusian case demonstrates that memory in exile is neither a retreat from politics nor a consensual project. It is a site of struggle, alliance, and continued negotiation. After 2020 and 2022, Belarusian political identity did not dissolve. It came into being and continues to do so through memory practices that operate across cities, borders, and digital platforms. In inter-imperial contexts, memory does not reconcile histories, it keeps them in motion. And precisely in this motion lies its political power. Thank you for attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. The third speaker is Artsiom Sizintsau, and the topic is the newspaper Offside in the system of sports Press of Belarus. You got mine. This guy, I think I'll pass it down.
Good afternoon, dear participants and dear guests of the conference. My name is Sizintsau, and I want to present you my presentation about the newspaper Offside, which was really untypical, picture of sports newspapers in Belarus at the end of 90s, and it was distinguished of many other newspapers because of several reasons. First of all, it was the center of sport periodicals. Naturally, was in Minsk. It's still in Minsk, with some exceptions when some editorials were presented in Orsha, in Slavonic, but it were only short-term newspapers. And this newspaper has its center in Borisov, not far from Minsk, but it was very untypical paper because of its strong, strict political views and opinion about football grounds, about football events in the country and abroad. Belarusian sport newspapers has it has a long history, but many of them pretended to speak about results, about some particular clubs, make interviews with players, with coaches, but the distinguishing role of the newspaper Offside was in completely another presentation of this football society. It encountered not only interviews, and not interviews about football, about results, about tournaments, but about only about their football science, to be called, to be mentioned some topics in football, inside football, which were not presented in, for instance, Pergl, the most well-spread newspaper in the history of Belarus, or even in Всё Футболе, which was different articles were written there, but about results mostly, about some club's progress, but not about their not went deep inside some moments in football, some club's life and players' life as well. Features of writing Offside, there are many different experiments with Belarusian language. Newspaper had some articles in Russian, but it were written by Alexander Maisky, for instance, journalist and commentator, who told about the history of Dynamo Minsk in the Soviet era championships, but 98% of articles were in Belarusian, and the newspaper worked with Tarashkevitsa, with their traditional style of language, and also use some experimental words which we can meet in different in some dictionaries, but it's not well spread style of telling about football, about sports, and about speaking in Belarusian. It's not so typical pronunciation and not so typical spelling. Some words, these words mentioned in this picture are different from words, mostly different from words we use nowadays. And as I mentioned before, a minimum of game reports, a maximum of impressions and reactions to football events, public life in Belarus. It paved a way of first prohibition of the newspaper in Borisov at the town's stadium, a local stadium. It was prohibited first time in 2 months after first edition, after first issue of the newspaper. It was a special rule before in Belarus when you have less than 300 copies of the newspaper, you can spread it freely without registration in the Ministry of Information. So this paper had 299 copies and was well spread in the stadium among fans, among football fans. But in 2 months, the head of Reborn club, but Borisov, it was prohibited because of some criticism made in the paper. Later, it was amnesty in this case, but the newspaper was finished its life after new researchers in the small building where people, usually 4 or 5 members of the staff worked under next copies and next issue, and it was the history of the paper was finished with enforced, and it's in this case I can say that it's a bad story. Any +1 example of restrictions of battle the state against independent journalism. And then next I want to mention some words, some descriptions, what were used by journalists of the newspaper. They used all these words like Swiss bankers, Andorran amateurs. It were rather typical, probably predictable, but they made this style on a full scale almost every time when they presented the next opponent of Belarusian national team. They presented it in this way, that we're going to play against Swiss bankers, and they explain what Switzerland means, what they're speaking about, what the country, what the perception of this country authorities to Belarusian history, or is there any connection, political connection with Belarus, with this country. And then they explained only then they moved to football details, but they explained the character of this country, some historical stages of this country before speaking about football. And Четвопа Mishtailami, it was like a humoristic page, a humoristic rubric in this newspaper. And there are a lot of different humoristical cartoons and anecdotes, some stories. They always spoke about the level of football in Belarus, which was really low that time, and nowadays it's even lower. But anyway, they made some special thing, special dish from this dusty thing like Belarusian football. They spoke about abandoned grounds, about undeveloped stadiums, but they used every time they used this humor, they used this comparative method, and they told, yeah, okay, naturally we cannot compare ourselves with English grounds, with even with Andorra, but we play still better than Andorran players because they are amateurs and we are at least professionals. So it was very quite interesting. I think the unique paper, the unique number of the Offside was printed at the end of 2001 when all newspaper was dedicated to women, to the perception of women, how they understand football, how they look at this, and they showed as really first journalists who showed women perception of football, and they really demonstrated that it's almost the same like men look at this. Just we have some stereotypes that women are not interested in football. Women can come to the stadium only with their husband, with their boyfriend, with their brother somewhere else. But in reality, in this different articles printed in these copies, it was the evidence that girls really support football clubs, really love football as a branch of our life, and they don't focus on the interest of some men. And there were some examples when the girl supported another club than her husband supported. It was quite untypical for Belarus. Even now, I think it would be sensational. It would be sensational when some articles would print it like this with this style. The newspaper loved to have feedback and contact with readers. They always contacted. They always gathered different informations from the readers. Also, they addressed some advices to the readers where they can find some useful information, because it was an era when the internet wasn't so widely implemented in Belarus. Naturally, people really asked journalists where they can find some pen and some scarf, some information about the history of football in Belarus. They were interested in it, and they got answer from the staff, editorial staff. It was the last page of my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very entertaining. The final presentation is by Dr. Pavel Voinitski, entitled Wrong Riders, Latest Equestrian Monuments in Contemporary Belarus. So,
Try to be as short as possible, being the last presenter. And so, does it work? Anyway, I'm not only a theorist, but also I hold a BA degree in sculpture. So, and I like to talk about something that really bothers me, both as a scholar and also an artist, when I look at contemporary Belarusian public sculpture. So it's going to be about equestrian statues. Such kind of statue isn't just a monument, it's just a superpower among personified monuments, lending even greater significance to the individual represented. Traditionally, this genre of monumental sculpture has been associated with the commemoration of strong military and or political leaders, and has functioned as a key, powerful visual instrument for representing dominant historical narratives. Belarus currently has numerous equestrian statues dedicated to historical figures. Most of them were installed during the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Among them are monumental statues of, for example, Czesław the Cherugist, erected in Poland in 2007, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Alhert, in Vitebsk from 2014, and Duke Hedemin in Lida, that's the last one, 2019. However, since 2020, only 2 equestrian monuments have been installed in the country. The monument to Alexander Nevsky, unveiled in Minsk in 2023, and the monument of Konstantin Rokossovsky, erected in Homel in 2025. Let's begin from Nevsky case. In early 2023, plans were announced to install the equestrian monument to Alexander Nevsky. The public reaction was critical. For instance, the renowned Belarusian artist Vladimir Cesler shared his own visualization of the new monument on social media, this one. Those familiar with the dictator's well-known passion from hockey would understand Cesler's irony. However, moving from satire to reality, here was actually installed a monument that was actually installed in the end. The statue, a monumental 11 meters bronze, was installed on November 14, 2023, near the embassy of the Russian Federation in Belarus, without the usual competitive process, supported personally by Alexander Lukashenko. Belarusian sculptors Yaroslav Filipovich and Mikhail Rogatka were its creators. Let's take a moment and look at the opening. Maybe it's gonna move and it's gonna be sound. No sound. Anyway, doesn't matter. They talk about some kind of friendship between Russia and...
Это не просто памятник человеку в истории, это дань уважения россиянам.
Предложение установить в центре столицы первую в Минске конную статую одобрил президент Республики Беларусь. Воплощение данной инициативы – это результат кропотливой, скоординированной совместной работы Белорусской православной церкви, Минского городского исполнительного комитета и
That's it. So they talk about like Russian-Belarusian friendship, yeah, about like I'll give you one citation. It's from the official press release of Belarusian Patriarchate. Monument erection is so it was like a manifestation of the unified spiritual space. Yeah, that's the citation of Belarus and Russia. embodying their shared historical and cultural tradition. The end of that citation. You see the Russian ambassador Boris Gryzlov, and this guy, remember him. We will see him a bit later on the next opening. And the patriarch who concentrated the monument, and a few pictures for the atmosphere, just to understand the vibe of this event. And you see all pantheon of pro-official guys and some and who is the person on the horse? That's the well-known image of Alexander Nevsky, completely invented by the Soviet painter Pavel in 1942. There are no historical images of the prince. No one knows what he looked like. Most historians question even the dates of his life. There is also the lack of archaeological evidences of his victories. So it's almost completely mythologized character in Russian history. Nevertheless, the figure of Nevsky holds significant military symbolism. He is the saint patron of Russian army, Russian Navy since 2012 and ground forces in 2016. He remains a military symbol of the Russian Federation, amplified through historical narratives and propaganda. Throughout Russian history, the figure of Alexander Nevsky have been used during periods of aggressive military expansion, often directed at the territory of Belarus. For example, his canonization in 1547 coincided with the imperial ambitions of Muscovite Tsar Ivan the Terrible. During the Livonian War, Ivan the Terrible devastated the own Belarusian city of Polotsk, and the next revival of Nevsky happened under the militaristic reign of Tsar Peter the Great in 1723. Then, during the Second World War, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin used Nevsky image to bolster wartime morale and justify militarization efforts. This propaganda era produced numerous artworks across cinema, painting, sculpture, and poster, depicting Nevsky as a heroic figure against the backdrop of, for example, knights like this, yeah, like knights crusaders or proto-fascists. Examples include Sergei Eisenstein film Alexander Nevsky, this one, accompanied by Sergei Prokofiev iconic musical score. The historical interpretations underscore a consistent pattern. Whenever the Russia enters phases of militarization, Alexander Nevsky image assumes highlighted prominence in propaganda efforts. For instance, during the annexation of Crimea in 2014, President Vladimir Putin decreed celebrations making the supposed anniversary of Nevsky birth, aiming to preserve military historical heritage and reinforce Russian national unity. So there are a lot of monuments like Minsk one in any regions of Russia. And I would like maybe to say a couple of words about this one. That's enormously megalomaniacal, huge one. This monument is titled Prince Alexander Nevsky with his retinue, and was unveiled to commemorate this anniversary of his birth. And here is the opening ceremony, and it will, as you can see, Putin and Patriarch again, and so on, so far. And interestingly, distinctive features of these monuments are mirrored in the Belarusian statue. in similar bronze depictions of Alexander Nevsky in comparable iconography have emerged beyond Russia's border, where it aims to extend its influence. For instance, in July 13, 2023, a similar statue was unveiled in Almaty, this one. And another one in the Russian-occupied Mariupol in September 2022, this one. Okay. The second monument, which I described briefly, was unveiled in November 26 in Homel, the second largest city in Belarus. And this monument to Konstantin Rokossovsky. As we know, Rokossovsky was the one primary architect of Soviet victory in World War II. It commanded the First Belarusian Front, and Rokossovsky has been an honorary citizen of Homel since 1967 and is celebrated as its liberator. However, this hardly indicates a personal attachment to the city itself. For example, Rokossovsky, an ethnic Pole, is also the liberator of Warsaw in 1944. Or more accurately, he liberated the ruins that remained after the Warsaw uprising was suppressed, while his armies waited in the suburbs for the city total destruction. In this sense, Marshal Rokossovsky was the loyal and obedient instrument of Joseph Stalin's political will. On July 24, 1945, Rokossovsky commanded the historic First Victory Parade on the Red Square in Moscow. He led the parade on horseback, and it was precisely this image that inspired the Belarusian monuments creators, Russian sculptor Vera Pashina. Here are the few photos from opening. So they destroyed the historical square, just cut all the trees and put all of this Soviet-like design with the statue in the middle. And they are same facial expressions, same guys from the administrators, and so on and so far. And as you can see, last remark, this guy, Vladimir Medinsky, who is the chairman of the Russian Military Historical Society. Yeah, it's a state institution established by Vladimir Putin decree in 2012. RMHS declares it was created, start quote, to consolidate the effort of the state and society in studying Russia's military historical past, promoting the study of Russian military history, countering attempts to distort it, popularizing achievements in military historical science, enhancing the prestige of military servants and fostering patriotism, end quote. So the monumental propaganda is one of the declared direction of RMHS activities. In 11 years of its operation, it has created 577 monuments, stelae, and memorials. So there are a lot of monuments around Russia. Yeah. So let's stop here. And I just would like to say that the two recent Belarusian equestrian monuments symbolize like Russian military expansion and dominance by reviving imperial myth. Wherever the Russian Federation asserts itself as an aggressor state, the equestrian figures of Alexander Nevsky and Konstantin Rokossovsky project the ideas of Ruski Mir and Russian invisibility. And in reality, however, they signify war, terror, and forced Russification. They are clear instruments for propaganda, propagating the ideological messages of Russian Federation, forcefully extending the dissemination of Russian historical memory beyond Russia's border. So that's the end. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for this.
So, yeah, we're running behind. Are we okay for 10 minutes? One round of questions. Okay. So Alan first. Yeah. So let me just count the questions first. One, you were the second one, third one, fourth one. Okay. I think that will probably be enough.
Very brief question.
Yeah, I'm Alan Flowers, chair of the Belarusian Society, but also I'm a coordinator of the British sort of political action diaspora group. So I was quite fascinated in your talk, which I fully appreciate is founded in the historical memory aspect. But I'm wondering if you've done any comparative studies of, shall we say, more recently created, for example, the post-Second World War diasporas, like in the UK, and there are quite strong groups in Germany, Italy, Denmark, and of course the American one, these more recent ones. Have you been looking at these to do any comparisons as to how the lack of a historical memory impacts on any way on the work they do?
Next question.
Next question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation. I have two questions. One regarding football presentation. It was fascinating, and I'm just interested whether they were using the word болельщик or завзятор as a word for football fan. And also, it is interesting that for many years and in many countries, the kind of football fandom was used as a platform for right-wing people. So it was interesting to see the kind of the recognition of women football spectators. It's interesting. And the other one is regarding the fact that in Dzержinsk, there is actually a monument that is called Меч Невского, щит Дзержинского, and there is an inscription with citation from Lukashenko, теперь Дзержинские будут знать, что я их защищаю. And there is like, a sword and like the heraldry of Dzержinsk. So I'm interested what you are thinking about that, considering the fact that there is another mention of Nevsky.
Any questions?
There are two more.
I will probably almost repeat. Okay, my question has partly been asked. It's actually a question to David. Why London is not there? Because London is the only place in Western Europe where the Belarusian life has existed without any interruption, without interruptions now for 80 years, exists in third generation. It's such a wonderful example, but I suspect that there's a good reason why it's not there, just not the case.
Okay, and the last question was up here.
Please introduce anyway, just in case.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, Vera Haponova, Edinburgh University. My question is to Artsiom also. Based on your presentation, the people who created Offside newspaper were pretty creative and produced some quality journalism. So I just wondered, do you know who they were and what they did after their paper was shut down? Do we know them?
Okay, so we can answer that. Yeah, I think.
If I understand your question, for me, it was why I have no other very important diasporic center in London also, and in Canada and the USA. It's about my possibilities for ethnography, for fieldworks, for interviews. And I choose my perspective for Central Eastern Europe, like region, because these countries like Czech and Poland, Lithuania was part of Soviet space, and Czech and Poland, it was part of also Soviet system like satellite. And for me, this country has the most similar structural memories, something like this. Like it's because this region is very similar in memories practice size. Because we, for example, in Czech we have Karta 77 with Pavel and this dissident, and this is also important for Belarusian. For example, if I research and discussed with members of Belarusian diaspora, I understand there is like link between people from Charta 77, like Sokol and Františka Sokolova and other people, because Havel also very lots of time he supported Belarusian diaspora. And Poland, it's maybe more important, solidarity. This is the same. I think if I wrote my article, I understand. For example, if during protest there was lots of like
comparisons.
Lots of meanings, lots of frames also about linked with Belarusian protest and solidarity, also like spring in Czech. And for me, this region is he's like some structurally mnemonic specific. This is differently from England and USA.
I will start answering the questions from the end for the third question about people who created the newspaper, who worked about in this sphere. Yeah, I know them. They were people very active in social and political life as well, and they were all from Borisov. And unfortunately, I wanted to contact the chief editor, the first chief editor of the newspaper, who was substituted with his colleagues later. But unfortunately, at the end of 2025, he was arrested, and nowadays he is imprisoned. One more political prisoner in our country. So only after, maybe I will try to contact him when he's still behind the bars. Probably I will contact him after. We will see. But yeah, I know we know these people. They were openly showed who are they. They have special rubrics when they told about themselves, about their interests, how they understood the importance of football, about writing about football sphere and the importance of Belarus, the importance of Belarusian language, the importance of working with friends. So yeah, they are well-known people in Borisov. But nowadays, no one among them is a person who brightly has an access to the public sphere, because the public sphere is blocked with pro-power stakeholders, and unfortunately, these people are not participating in football life on this scale. I wanted them to participate in this field. And continue with a lexical question. They experimented, and they also had a variety of different descriptions of football terminology, for instance, and not only football. They used the word "gospodarstwa" instead of "держава." For instance, Jan Stankiewicz used the same word to describe the state, to speak about the country, the authorities, and their economical sphere as well. He used the word "господарство" very often, and these journalists also use this word. And speaking about болельщик or завзятор, in some sometimes they used болельщик, sometimes they used завзятор, but with they preferred Belarusian words like how to describe it in a better way, but don't know. They used the better language, I think. They understood that завзятор is more this pattern of this word is more Belarusian, is more interesting, is more powerful than болельщик borrowed from Russian, made by Russian sample, and so on. And what about women? About political prescriptions? They were enemies. First, they became enemies of Kapski, of the head of Bate, because they were for our national values. They were strictly, they supported strictly our flag, our coat of arms, our history, our language. And Kapski, at that time, not so deep, but he was Lukashenko supporter. So they were in the controversy from the very start. Then the newspaper became an enemy for the authorities, because they always expressed their opinion. They always spoke about disadvantages of football sphere, sporting sphere, and also they touched other spheres of life. They explained that football strongly depends on social life. It cannot exist without it. And when people feel themselves completely deliberate, completely or already arrested without being arrested, they cannot feel themselves at the stadium on the full scale freely. Not, unfortunately, they always has these troubles, some obstacles erased by the police, about the directors of the stadiums, and so on. And then next, they became enemies of right-wing hooligans, because they expressed Belarusian national values. And that time in Belarus, mostly ultras and hooligans were associated with pro-Russian views. So they were in strong conflict with the first group of Bate supporters, who they weren't Russia supporters, but they were less. They had a lack of understanding who we are and what Belarus means. So the newspaper explained its audience, what does it mean? What is Belarus? Why we're speaking Belarusian? Why we speaking about values? And they always they also had a special page dedicated to football history of Belarus, and they started to speak on their way, on their level, that our football started long, long ago, much before Soviet books wrote about it, because they mentioned some works of Soviet historians who claimed that, who just told that Belarusian football started with Bolsheviks, but it wasn't true actually, because it started long before Bolsheviks, and we need to rewrite this history. We need to have more exploration, more articles on this topic, and it wasn't the general line which was supported by the others, and the French were more primitive than a bit later. They started to understand who we are, and I think that the newspaper Offside also helped in this way to understand, to promote Belarusian national values on all nation, despite of this paper wasn't well spread. It was delivered to the other parts of Belarus. It's not it wasn't sold only in Paris, but the popularity of these articles.
Yeah, we have to stop now.
Also helped other people to understand who we are, and also football fans either. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, and just thank all the presenters today for a very entertaining panel. Oh, sorry, one more. Okay.
Just a last picture, because it's about official narratives here in public space, and I guess there are only a few ways to kind of eliminate it. Yeah, recontextualize, for example, recontextualized, or simply reconfigure it. Yeah. So, and as a sculptor, I particularly drawn to this approach. Yeah. So it was the horse statue before. It's about Dzerzhinsky, Rokossovsky, and so on and so far. And it's a piece by Kara Walker, the part of exhibition which is called Monuments in Los Angeles right now. So it was the monument of one of the generals from Civic War. And artists just she literally cut apart and reconfigured the equestrian monument of this kind of Stonewall Jackson from Charlottesville. And right now, it's not just a noble victim commemorating the losing side of the war as heroes. So it's like strange, interesting, human-like or horse-like figure. Also, I like it. It's not obviously, I'm not suggesting to do exactly the same for the new Belarusian monuments, but however, once something changed, fates of disappear, this statue became simply irrelevant, and fundamentally out of place. That's it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry for missing you out. Completely accidental. Yeah, I was just going to say it's great to have such an entertaining panel at the end of the day, and to thank all the panelists for their papers today. So please give them a round of applause.